Welcome back to another beautiful day in the land of music. My name is Douglas, and in today's video, I'm going to be comparing the maudio Oxygen Pro with the maudio Hammer 88 Pro. Now, these are two of the latest controllers that maudio has released, and you may be looking at these and saying, wait a second, aren't these the same exact controller, or isn't the meat of the controller the same, just a different number of keys? And to some extent, that is true. There are a lot of similarities. There are some slight differences, some different variations. And so this video is targeted towards those of you that are trying to decide which one you want to buy. And hopefully this will give you the perspective and the information you need to go out and buy the one that's right for you and the music that you create. So let's jump right in, and I'm going to start off by talking about some of the things that they may be obvious similarities, but nonetheless, I'm going to cover them just so there's no question for you. And we're going to start off by talking about the controls and the layout. So some of the things that are the same on them, they both have 16 RGB velocity sensitive pads. These are the same between both. I will note that the controls feel slightly different between the Hammer 88 Pro and the Oxygen Pro, primarily because I have the 25 key version and the 88 Pro is a lot heavier. This is a very light controller. This is a very heavy controller, which I love for piano playing. It's great, but it does affect how the controls feel. So the pads feel really solid on the Hammer 88 Pro. When you get over to the Oxygen Pro, same feel. The pad is made of the same material, but it feels a little tinier just because the controller itself is much lighter. A few other things that are the same. The knobs are the same on both controllers. These soft buttons here on the right-hand side are exactly the same. Your controls here for the transport, those are all the same between the two. And then over here, you get some differences. So the screen is the same, the rotary selector and the shift key is the same, but then depending on the variation that you get. So let's talk about that for a minute. The Oxygen Pro comes in the Mini, the 25, the 49, and the 61 key versions. The Hammer 88 Pro is 88 keys. I'll talk about the keys more in a couple of minutes, but when it comes to the controls and the layout of the controls, the Mini and the 25 of the Oxygen Pro are laid out a little bit differently than the 49, 61, and Hammer 88 Pro. On the smaller two variations of the Oxygen Pro, they've stacked some of the functionality into the buttons here above the screen, and you'll notice we don't have the mode select buttons or anything like that as we do on the 88, and you would also have that on the 49 and 61 key versions of the Oxygen Pro. So let's take a look at that for a second. So on the 49, 61 versions of the Oxygen Pro and on the Hammer 88 Pro, all the controls are identical on the front panel. You have 9 faders, 9 buttons down here. 8 of those are select buttons. Some of them change the ARP, the latch, the chord scale mode, your time signatures, and then over here under your 9th fader, you have a mode select. And that's also where your global menu is. Compared to the Mini and the 25, that global menu sits on the back button. So when it comes to the controls, the two smaller versions, the Mini and the 25, they've compacted the controls. All of the functionality is still there. Chord mode, scale mode, arpeggiator, all identical between all of these, but how you get to those functions is a little bit different between the different variations of the controllers. A couple other things in terms of differences in controls and layout between the Hammer 88 Pro and the Oxygen Pro line are that even though the buttons, as I'm looking at these in detail, they seem exactly the same, the buttons feel less tacky and clicky on the Hammer 88 Pro. And I think that's completely because the Hammer 88 Pro is just a really solid controller. Heavy, solidly built, and the Oxygen Pro line is much more portable and just a lighter overall controller. Great if you're traveling around with this, but the Hammer 88 Pro does feel more solid in terms of the buttons. Faders, knobs, everything else is exactly the same. The only other difference comes down to the octave down and up and the pitch and mod wheels. So on the Oxygen Pro line, these are plastic pitch and mod wheels, just hard plastic. Same with the octave up and down buttons, plastic and clicky. Over on the Hammer 88 Pro, this has been upped a little bit. So they've got really nice grippy lit up pitch and mod wheels. And then the octave down and up buttons are nice soft buttons, just like we've got here on the right-hand side, these two toggle buttons. Nice and rubbery feel for the octave up and down. I'll say that on an 88 key keyboard, do you really need an octave up and down? Maybe if you're always playing right here and you want to shift that, I'll leave that up to you. To me, I just shift where I'm playing and that seems to do fine. But the pitch and mod wheel feel much better quality than they do on the Oxygen Pro. So now let's talk about keys. This and the inputs and outputs are the biggest differences between the Oxygen Pro line and the Hammer 88 Pro. So on the Hammer 88 Pro, you have fully weighted, graded hammer action keys. They feel wonderful. They're not too heavy, not too light. And I kind of equate it to how a real grand piano feels. They feel really good. I'm able to get the dynamics that I want, and I've played this for weeks now, and I absolutely love the key bed on this controller. When it comes to the Oxygen Pro, these are semi-weighted, and I would almost wager to say that they're on the lighter side of semi-weighted, though my only comparison is the Nord Stage 3 Compact, which has a beautifully wonderful semi-weighted waterfall key bed. So that's my only comparison here, but I feel like these keys, they're not far off from synth action. A little bit clicky, but you know, again, they feel a little bit better quality than you'd get on some of the synth action controllers out there. So if you're looking for synth action, I wouldn't let the semi-weighted deter you at all from this controller. I don't feel like that's a very hard semi-weighted action, and it's really nice to play. For synth, for electric piano, for all those different instruments, this keyboard is really nice. But if you're looking for piano weighted, I would definitely go for the Hammer 88 Pro. That's going to give you that nice weighted action. I love this. And as I've said in previous videos, the Hammer 88 Pro is going to be the centerpiece of my studio desk that I'm building to go back here. Those videos are coming. I apologize for the delay there, but wood prices right now are out of this world, so I'm holding off a little bit on that just to see if that comes down a little bit. But again, action on the Hammer 88 Pro, beautiful graded hammer action. Action on the Oxygen Pros, I still love it, but it's a semi-weighted, and I wouldn't let that deter you. If you're looking for synth action, don't even worry. Semi-weighted, it really isn't that far off from a lot of synth action keyboards that I've played. The keys are closed front on the Oxygen Pro and the Hammer 88 Pro. Same in that regard. A lot of synth action keyboards have an open front. It doesn't really matter to me what they are, but probably because these are semi-weighted, they've got a closed front on them here. So one other place that there's a difference is the inputs and the outputs. So the Oxygen Pro line comes with, obviously, the USB port. That's what powers the Oxygen Pro. And then you've got an on-off switch. You've got a sustain pedal input, not an expression pedal. It is a sustain pedal input. And then you've got a 5-pin MIDI out. So your standard 5-pin traditional MIDI out. So what you're playing, the notes you're playing on the Oxygen Pro can go out and can control a sampler, another keyboard, whatever you're trying to use this with. The Hammer 88 Pro comes with a few more inputs and outputs. So it's got the USB. I'm actually powering both of these off the same laptop just through the USB cord. It does come with an AC port, doesn't come with an AC adapter, but you could pick one of those up based on the specs that are labeled on the back of the controller. And if for some reason you didn't want to use the USB functions at all, you just wanted to go traditional MIDI to a controller, you could either power this off of like a USB block plugged in with USB, or you could get a power adapter and actually power it with a power adapter. Has the on-off switch, same as the Oxygen Pro. I love having an on-off switch on a controller. For some reason, I don't like having to unplug the controller from the computer to turn it off. Personal preference, you may not care, but they both have on-off switches. The Hammer 88 Pro has 4 pedal inputs. So it has an expression pedal input for a volume style expression pedal, and it's got a sustain pedal and 2 other foot switch style inputs. So you can have 4 pedals plugged into this, which is pretty cool. You also have MIDI in and out. I haven't really figured out how you'd use the MIDI in, except for maybe taking a sampler or a keyboard and going out from that into the Hammer 88 Pro and then through USB to the computer, maybe to record MIDI notes through the Hammer 88 Pro. That's the only way I can think of that you'd want to use the MIDI in function, but it has the traditional 5-pin MIDI in and out ports on the controller. So a lot more options when it comes to inputs and outputs on the Hammer 88 Pro, but if you're just looking for a straightforward controller that you're going to be plugging into the computer with USB, it doesn't really matter. I'd say the biggest thing at that point is, do you want to use an expression pedal with it? Then you might want to go with the Hammer 88 Pro. Granted, it is quite a bit more expensive even than the 61 key version of the Oxygen Pro. So if from a functionality standpoint, you're just looking for a controller, don't care about weighted keys, go for the Oxygen Pro line. I would opt for the 49 or the 61 key versions because then you get the 9 faders, you get the mode selects, which I think is really handy when it comes to controlling your DAW. So talking about DAWs, let's talk about some of the capabilities within these controllers, just if you're new and you're looking to buy these and you're wondering, is this going to work for me? Both of them have DAW controlled functionality. Both of them have all of your chord, scale, arpeggiator, all of that's the same. And I've found that these work absolutely perfect with Pro Tools. No bugs, I've never had an issue. They work flawlessly and I love how they control Pro Tools. If you're using another DAW, they have the ability to control a bunch of other DAWs. So check out other videos that I have on those, but there's built-in presets for a bunch of DAWs and a bunch of virtual instruments on these controllers. They both have the same capabilities in terms of customizing the controls. They both have the preset editor on the computer, so you've got a really nice user interface to customize the controls, or you can do a lot of that customization right from the screen here on the controller. The last thing I wanted to talk about is what's included with these, and it's the same between the Oxygen Pro and the Hammer 88 Pro. They both come with some free virtual instruments with thousands of sounds. So you've got piano, you've got electric piano, you've got synth, and then if you download Pro Tools, you get even more free plugins with that. You get a tone wheel organ, you get a drum machine, and a couple other synth style plugins as well. So that's awesome. As soon as you get this, you can plug it into the computer, register with maudio, download the software manager, and then you can get right to playing. You don't even have to download a DAW. You just download the free plugins. They're standalone plugins that come with this, and you're off rocking and rolling with thousands of sounds. So if you want DAWs, these come with Ableton Live Lite, Pro Tools First Edition, and MPC Beats. Along with MPC Beats, there's a bunch of free beat packs that come with it. So go check those out. These come with plenty of virtual instruments to get you up and running. If you're just learning about computer audio, computer MIDI, recording, and all of that, these come with plenty to get you started. And then as you learn the DAWs, maybe you start off with Pro Tools First or Ableton Live Lite, you can upgrade to the full versions of those. So I hope this video was helpful for you. If you've got questions, throw them in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer them. And if I don't have an answer, we have a great community here. They'll jump in and get those questions answered for you. Thanks for watching. Stay inspired and keep making that music.